Hi, I'm Brian Carpenter from Rainbow Aviation. Today we're going to be talking about how to make up a flared tube assembly. What we have right here is an example of a flared tube assembly that's already made up, where we have basically three components. We have our tubing that we're working with, we have what's called the B-nut, and we have what's called the sleeve. And all we're going to do is install these onto the part that we're working with, and we'll end up with a flared fitting on the end of this. And there's our flared fitting with our sleeve on the inside of that. So to start with, we're going to cut our tube to the proper length. We'll go ahead and mark it, and then we'll go ahead and install our cutter. And we're going to want to rotate this in a specific direction. Normally we want to pull the roller around the back side of this. So as we go, we're just going to be tightening and rolling each time that we do this, and we'll just keep going until we actually get the tube to cut off. We don't want to force it and go too fast where we will actually end up with a big burr on the end of that. So we've ended up with our tube cut off to the proper length. Now we need to deburr the end of this so that it'll give us a nice flare, and so that we don't actually end up with any cracks in the end of it. Okay? So we'll use a file, and we're just going to, I like to go ahead and cut it off flush. Make sure that we've got a nice 90-degree end on the end here. Take any little burrs off the outside. And then I like to use a automotive style or a woodworking style 45-degree countersink, which works really nice to get that little burr off the inside of our tube. Okay? So now we've got to figure out how we're going to install this flare onto the end of this thing. What we're going to use is a flaring tool. The flaring tool that we have here today is an aviation-style flaring tool. This is different than an automotive-style flaring tool. An automotive-style flaring tool is 45-degree angle, where the aviation is 37.5. If you were to actually try and use your automotive flaring tool to do this and put it on an aircraft application, more than likely you would end up with a leak. So let's install our tubing onto this. To start with, as you can see, we have different dies on the inside of this. We can rotate those around and come up with the proper die for the diameter of tube that we're trying to flare. In this case, this is a number 4 tube, or a 1/4 inch, and so we'll set both the bottom and the top dies to a 1/4 inch, and then we'll install our tube. Before we do that, though, we need to remember, if this is a bent tube, we'd better install our B-nut and our flare on there first, or you're going to be doing this project over again. So we'll install our tube, get it put in place. When this dog is all the way in the down position, you can see it moves in and out. It just needs to be bottomed out so that that acts as a stop for the depth gauge on that tube as it actually goes in. You can see us going right in against that. If this dog is out of the way and you fail to do that, you could insert that so far that you would end up cracking that flare at the end. So we'll put it back right up against that, and once that's done, then we'll just flip up the top of this, and that dog moves out of the way. Once we flip that up, that actually is the arm that we use to tighten down the end of this. So we'll go ahead and snug it up good. And before we go to flare it, we're just going to lubricate it slightly with a little bit of the lubricating oil that we're going to use for whatever system we're using. If it's an engine oil, we'll probably use engine oil on it. If it's hydraulic fluid, we'll probably use hydraulic fluid as the lubricating medium. Go ahead and we'll tighten it right on up. And we'll back it off. Doesn't take a whole lot of pressure. You don't have to really jump on it in there. Back it all the way off. Undo the clamp and pull it out of the assembly. And there we have our completed assembly. Nice flare on there. We're looking now at this point to make sure that we don't have any deformation, any cracks. Any of that would be unacceptable. We would have to reflare it. But done properly, you shouldn't end up with cracks. This is a very standard procedure, and very seldom done properly will you ever end up with a crack. You might, however, if you're trying to do some tubing that is hard, or if it's the wrong alloy. The typical alloy that we use in these kinds of applications is generally 5052O aluminum alloy. So fuel lines, oil lines, that kind of stuff, we'd typically be using that kind of alloy for doing the hose installation. So once we've done that, we're just going to clean up our little hose, blow it out, make sure we don't have any contamination in there. And we wouldn't want to install a hose with contaminated line. There's been many cases where engines have been damaged because individuals have forgot to or inadvertently had contamination in the hose when they actually installed it on the airplane. So there we have it, a nice AN B-nut and sleeve installation on a hose. You should be able to do that also for your own projects. Doesn't take that much work. So good luck with your projects.